Today I want to talk about one of the big barriers in a successful relationship, and it has to do with how we allow our beliefs to influence how we feel about our partner. So I want you to think about an event in your relationship, something that's really powerful that you think really symbolizes the relationship. It could be a positive or a negative event. So take a moment and think of something that was really like a defining moment in the relationship for you. And now once you have that defining moment, I want you to really think about how you feel or how you felt when that happened and how you feel now. Just to go into the feelings you have about this defining moment. Could be anger, sadness, fear, joy, hurt. Just go to the core emotion, and then I want you to take a moment to feel that. This is sometimes a little trickier, but I want you to start to think about, like, what's the belief underneath that? You know, when we have a negative event, we have a really negative emotions, we start to think things like, I'm not lovable, I'm not okay. It could be about you, it could be about your spouse. I can't trust this person. This person's not here for me. This is never going to work. There's some sort of core belief that usually gets triggered. And then that belief becomes a part of how we see the relationship. Now, this is an important exercise to do, because if you can start to identify these beliefs, and we're starting now, the way I'm kind of describing it, we're looking at a negative belief, but we'll look at positive ones later. Either one will work, though. You start to look at how these beliefs work as you start to see the relationship through that lens. So, for example, if I had a pair of orange glasses on and I was walking around the house, everything would look orange. Or if I was really hungry, I'd be looking for where all the food is. Or I go to a place and I'm really thirsty, I'm looking for what I can drink. So think about this for a minute, and think about, you have this defining event. You probably have a lot of other events which sort of back up this feeling. So let's say you feel really loved. You come home, your spouse has done the dishes. You may be like, wow, thank you for doing the dishes. Wow, I'm really loved. You really care about how I feel. But if you feel unloved, you may come home, see the dishes are done, and be like, okay, and then you notice the laundry is not done and feel like, ow, my needs don't matter. You don't care that I have the clothes I need for this week or whatever. This is kind of how this works. So now, once you kind of have this event and this feeling, I want you to start to think about where else in your life you felt this way. What other events throughout your past? I know for myself, so, you know, my wife is really athletic. So she did an Ironman at one point. She runs marathons, and she's tried to get me to run. And so when she first really asked me, and she talked about how she wants me to be in shape, and she wants me to live long, and she wants me as a dad to be fit, the first thing that came up for me was this feeling of like, oh my gosh, I have to like earn my lovability. I have to really like work at this, otherwise I'm not going to be good enough. Now, there's nothing that she said which indicates that, or that's not a fair interpretation of what she's saying, but that's what came up for me, and this is how these beliefs work. And if I go back, I could think of times like when I was in third grade, I had a really hard time reading, and I really thought like, wow, I'm not good enough. I have to earn my likability and my goodness, and I have, you know, obviously in school I have to earn grades. I have to learn to read to be okay. And when I go back even further, when I was really young, there was a time when I remember my mom asking me if I'd done my ABCs, and I was like, no, and she's just sort of like got frustrated and walked away. And the fear I had as a young child, I think I was 3 or something, was like, oh my gosh, if I don't do the right thing, I'm not going to be okay. I'm not going to be loved. So that's a belief I've had to work on throughout my life. But the point is, I bring it into my relationship. And so when my wife is like, yeah, I want you to get in shape, that gets triggered for me. So what is that for you? Start to think about that belief. Think about the feelings, and go back through your life and see where else you've felt it. So this is a really important exercise. So take a minute. Maybe close your eyes, just sort of follow the feelings in your body. Now, the reason this is important is because you and your significant other, your spouse, both come into the relationship with these beliefs, but when they get triggered in the relationship, the tendency is to blame the other person and blame your partner for them. And this can happen really simply. You know, it's last night my wife and I were driving home and we were going to stop at one place to eat. We were debating between two places. We passed one of them and started going to the next one. We were going to look at the menu. And she gets on the phone and she calls the place we passed and starts placing an order. So my initial thought was like, wait a minute, you're placing an order? We haven't even looked at the menu, and like you haven't really checked in with me. So it triggered that little flag of like, I don't matter. So I start to feel agitated, and I'm like, hey, why don't we just like stop? And she's like, I'm on the phone, and I'm getting more agitated now. She's getting agitated. And, you know, we worked it out really quick. It wasn't a big deal. But the point is, you have two people who love each other trying to figure out where we're going to go to eat. And the simplest thing, such as she's decided she's going to go ahead and order, triggers my whole thing of like, I don't matter. And we're off to the races. And this is a typical scenario. A lot of the couples I work with, when we look at the events that they're in conflict over, we look at like what are the things that their challenges are. It's not so much like what they're fighting over or the content of the fight. It's the beliefs that get triggered that really drive the conflict. And so if we can start to work with those beliefs, you can really make a huge difference in your relationship. So similarly, you can also start to look at something positive, like a really positive experience in your relationship. And then the feelings. And then look at the beliefs behind those. I know for myself, one time my wife planned a birthday surprise for me. It was like a Captain America birthday, because, you know, so like Captain America. So she actually got me flying lessons. So I went to an airport and like flew for half an hour or an hour. I got to be actually in the controls for a half an hour, but it was 15 minutes to take off, 15 minutes to land. And it was a really fun experience. It was actually also really terrifying. But then we went and we did this like parachute sort of thing, and it was awesome. And I felt like really loved and really cared for, and that she was really attentive to what she thought would be really fun for me. So that's an experience I can draw on. That's, you know, anytime I'm feeling upset or not good or feels like, you know, ooh, I have to earn my lovability, I remember that event and I start to feel better. So think about your spouse now. Think about how they sometimes feel. Like they may say things like, no matter what I do, I'm never good enough. I'm never good enough for you. Maybe your spouse shuts down all the time, or maybe they get really agitated. Both of those reactions are caused by a set of beliefs. Someone who shuts down usually feels like things are hopeless and nothing to do is ever good enough. Now maybe you ask them if they could, take their dishes off the dinner table, and they're like, nothing I do is good enough. And you're like, well, I can't even say anything in this relationship because my spouse is so touchy. So that may be true. That's something I work through with a lot of couples. But it's helpful to understand that what your trigger, that behavior is not because like you asked them to clean their dishes. It comes from something they already brought into the relationship that got triggered by you. So you don't want to like end up tiptoeing around your partners. That's a rule my wife and I have, is we are willing to challenge each other, knowing that it's going to trigger these things and hurt our feelings. But we're not going to hold back and soft pedal, because we're not going to get the kind of intimacy and connection we want that way. But I do want you to think about your spouse. So you and your spouse both have these beliefs, and you end up like, us, feeling like you don't matter over simple little things. Walking from the car to the house and trying to open the door can trigger it sometimes. There's all sorts of little things that can happen that trigger these feelings. And the thing is oftentimes in our lives we think about these big events, but it's often a lot of little events that keep building on those beliefs. So if I'd love for you to respond and let me know some of the beliefs you have about your relationship and maybe some of the defining events. I'd like to hear both your positive and negative beliefs. And if you feel like you resonate with this and you relate to this and this is something you'd like to talk more about, feel free to private message me. I love to jump on the phone with couples and help them kind of sort through maybe some of the beliefs that are operating in your relationships and ways that you can work through those to get to a better place. I love to support you any way I can. So thank you, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.